So we wanted to update you on Hurricane Michael. It's about 40 miles off the coast. It's starting to feel the effects now. It is a very dangerous Category 4. And just to remind the press, Hurricanes Harvey, Irma, and Maria were Cat 4. So these are big storms that we're looking at. So it'll hit the Panhandle, as you can see in this one right here, sir. And then it will go through Georgia and the Carolinas. Unfortunately, on the tail end, we do expect additional rain in the Carolinas, which could lead to additional flooding. FEMA is leaning forward, as we are with our interagency partners. We're forward deployed, we have search and rescue ready to go. We're in very close contact with state and local authorities. We've all spoken with the governor and local officials. And I'll turn it over to Brock to give additional detail.
Unfortunately, this is a Gulf Coast hurricane of the worst kind because all of the elements associated with hurricanes come into play. So as you see on the left, the storm surge estimates are anywhere between 9 and 14 feet. Storm surge is going to be the worst where the eye makes landfall, just to the east or south of where the eye makes landfall. Somewhere right now it's projected between Panama City, Apalachicola, and then it's going to push forward. So not only is it going to bring 14 feet of ocean water and coastal flood inundation, there'll be wave action on top of that, which is the primary driver of why we evacuate, sir. And then coupled with that, you've got over 145 mile per hour winds. Structures built before 2001 are not designed to handle that type of wind typically, and it's going to unfortunately push through the state. So we're asking citizens in Southwest Georgia, Central Georgia to be vigilant and make sure that they understand what's about to come, because this area is going to see a Cat 1, Cat 2 storm as it moves inland, and with the vegetation there, what we're anticipating is a lot of downed trees impacting the power grid. And here again, we're going to see a lot of devastation along the coast structurally, and then as it moves in, you're going to see power outages throughout the state. And then unfortunately, you're going to see rainfall into South Carolina and North Carolina. The Cape Fear was projected to start receding from Hurricane Florence 2 days ago, and this will basically exacerbate the problem and add to it a little bit to where it's going to keep those waters from receding a little bit as it exits the state by Friday.
So they're reporting that this is one of the most powerful hurricanes ever to hit our country. Is that actually a fact?
So in this area, this would be the most intense hurricane that struck this area since 1851, if I remember correctly. So this would be
storm.
Yeah. Intense, very intense.
And this one is going to be heavy rain, or is it going to be the winds that are going to be the problem?
Storm surge and winds. And then for Georgia, they're going to see high inland winds. So you may see sustained Category 1, Category 2 winds with higher gusts that are associated. So we're expecting a lot of damage inland as well. But we have leaned forward with Governor Scott and his staff and Director Westmall down in Florida. They've been leaning forward as well. And, right now there's no identified shortfalls when it comes to pre-positioning. So we have teams, equipment, personnel, not only with and embedded with state of Florida staff and some of the local county emergency managers, but we have equipment and teams staged in Maxwell to Atlanta to Orlando, ready to move in once the elements subside and push through, and then we can move in and attack.
And we're working really closely with the private sector. So we have about 14 states, different utilities from 14 states are already ready to help with any energy outages.
Electric companies are from all over the country, actually. They're all lined up. As soon as it goes by, they're going to be working. And we've got food supplies, food chains. We're working with all of the states. And let me ask you, this started out very innocently a week ago. This was a small storm in an area they never thought. They said it grew into a monster.
Right, so the first initial indications from the National Hurricane Center started coming in around Saturday, and they picked it up and started raising the flag that, hey, this system's going to go from a wave to a depression and could potentially rapidly intensify. And unfortunately, that's typical of the Gulf Coast, and when they do this, citizens have less time to prepare or heed the warnings. We are concerned that many citizens chose not to heed those warnings, but we're prepared with search and rescue teams to try to go in and do what we can.
Any questions, please?
Yes. Are you concerned that folks in Florida and Georgia in the storms path weren't good enough and that there aren't enough evacuations to follow up on that point?
Yesterday, we were concerned that we did not like the level of evacuation activity that we were seeing, and Governor Scott, kudos to him. He leaned forward, used the new wireless emergency alert capabilities that we have, and sent out text messaging last night, leaned forward and said, hey, get out of there. And so we were trying to get people to really take the storm seriously. A lot of people did heed the warning, but then there are those who chose to stay behind. And unfortunately, first responders may not be able to go in and rescue those who dial 911 at this point.
Mr. President, can you give us a sense of the officials you've been in contact with and spoken to the governor?
I have, and the other governors, depending on what happens here, but they are all either contacted or are in the process. Had a long talk with Rick Scott, Governor Scott of Florida, very well coordinated with all of the states. And, one of the things that must be said is it's not so easy for some of these people to leave. Some of the areas are very poor. It's not easy for a person without the necessary money to leave. So what we've done is we've sent buses, we've sent a lot of different we're doing a lot of different things to try and remove people from the area, but a lot of people are very poor in certain of those areas, and it's very tough for them to leave. That's one of the problems you're finding, I guess. Huh?
Yeah, in some cases, what we ask to do on Blue Sky Days is ask people who may not have the means or the mechanisms to get out of town to register with their local emergency management agencies, and Florida's been pretty robust in doing that so that we have some idea of how to pre-plan for that. And then, we do what we can to be able to support the movement of people. When it comes to Georgia, we're not evacuating for storm surge in Georgia. This is going to be high winds, so we're asking people to get within a facility that can withstand the winds and try to shelter in place or seek out public shelters that may be open in Southwest Georgia.
But if you look at the size, how long it is, take a look at that, and the red area basically is the area which is going to hit pretty heavily, and that's a lot of shore. It's a lot of land.
There'll be 4 feet in storm surge all the way down to Tampa Bay, which is very low lying and floods very easily. But to give you that idea of the breadth of its path, it is quite large.
It's almost the entire size of the Gulf. When you look at it topically, it's almost the entire size of the Gulf, and they haven't seen that. Maybe they haven't seen that at all. Nobody's seen that before.
The eye diameter is pretty wide, which unfortunately is not good news as it makes landfall. So some people may say it's similar to an EF3 tornado making landfall in areas that are close to the eye. So it's.
Did last year's hurricanes in the area impair the infrastructure or weaken it in any way that they would struggle to deal with this year's hurricane?
Not in this area. Irma did not really heavily impact the Florida Panhandle. Most of the hit from Irma was in the southwest portion of Florida, and then moved up through and created some issues in the Jacksonville area, northeastern portion. But this area, it's been a long time since it's been hit, so the vegetation hasn't been stressed, and we're going to see a lot of damage and devastation, unfortunately, and we have to set the citizens' expectations that the power is going to be out for a while. And what FEMA's role in that is, as the Secretary was saying, our partnership with the private sector is that we work with the Florida Power and Lights, the Gulf Powers, the Southern companies, the Georgia Powers, to be able to help them, facilitate their mutual aid to come in. And they've got power crews coming in from multiple states across the country that are already pre-staged. And when we're hit, we work with them to do what's called first push debris to get the roadways open and so that we can get them down the roadways to start fixing the power. But that's going to take some time.
Mr. President, can you tell us changing any of your travel schedule?
Well, we don't know. I know I was going to Pennsylvania. It looks like there are thousands of people already lined up, and probably will do that tonight. And we're going to go down here as soon as we can. We don't want to interfere with anybody, but we want to go as soon as possible. You have, right nearby, we have thousands of people going tonight, and many are there already. What time were you going to be there? What time were we planning on that?
The rally tonight is scheduled for 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it's about 7. Well, I don't know what to do because you have so many people already there, and it's sort of unfair to them. So it's a mix.
So moving on to other topics, and I want to show you now that there are changes that are significant that are happening. This is the local radar. So they make their forecast as close as they can. You heard the National Hurricane Center say, we think this is going to hit in a particular town, Mexico Beach. That's what they thought it was going to do. This is live radar. This isn't a projection. This is what the storm is doing. That's the eye moving in real time. This is a time lapse, and that last view is where it is at this moment. It is not moving to the northeast in the way that was suggested before. It is, or to the northeast. It is moving in this direction, and it appears now, if it continues on this track, that the east side of Panama City, meaning Callaway and Parker and the East Bay in Panama City and everything to the east of that, it's appearing now that the eye wall may actually cross over. And there is a possibility now that the western edge of the eye wall itself may cross over parts of Panama City and Panama City Beach. Remember, Panama City Beach is this way. Here's Panama City. You come across a bridge here and get over toward Panama City Beach, and it's this long stretch. If memory serves, it's about 27 miles of white sand beaches. Some of it is residential, with older residential homes on stilts, and some of it is high-rises. Some of it is sprawling resorts, but it's 27 long miles. But again, all of that is to the west of Panama City. We're not talking about the eye hitting that. Look at this eye here. It's coming in this direction. Here's Panama City. Here's the city. Here is the beach. It's looking like this is going to, here's Tyndall Air Force Base. It's looking like the eye of this storm may clip Panama City. And that means the little suburban towns of Parker and Callaway, not large populations, but Parker and Callaway at least may get a touch of this eye wall. Same with Cedar Grove and Springfield, and maybe Panama City itself. Not the western side of Panama City like over by the bridge, but on the eastern side of Panama City. I mean, I'm going to back out now so you can see where this is going. This is the eye wall itself. This is real-time movement. Here's Tyndall Parkway. Here's Mexico Beach. The National Hurricane Center had been saying in the last hour, it looks like Mexico Beach may take a direct hit. Well, this is moving this way, and here's Mexico Beach. So instead, it's to the left of Mexico Beach. And could Panama City be hit by this? The town itself, not the beaches, it could. But look at this rain wrapping around. This is extremely heavy rain, and all of this area is still hurricane force winds. So, for instance, Panama City Beach would have winds coming off the land and onto the water at 120, 110, 130 mile an hour plus winds. So rather than the winds going onto the buildings on Panama City Beach, it'll be coming from the land and off because of that counterclockwise circulation. And then everything to the right, this is where the more serious storm surge would be. 10 to 13 feet, they've said, all the way down to Apalachicola. And look how far the rain extends now. All the way, is that Opelika? All the way up to Opelika, Alabama, which is basically Auburn and Opelika are right next to each other. That's Auburn University. This is Montgomery, Alabama, Columbus, Georgia. It's on the way to Tallahassee, Macon, Georgia. This storm is headed in that way, and it is going to be disastrous. Phil Keating is in Apalachicola now, and the conditions are deteriorating. Phil?
Yeah, they certainly are, Shep. Some hellacious wind and rain happening right where we are. This is another view looking westerly from our second floor balcony here at the hotel. Incidentally, this hotel is now surrounded by a moat, 3 to 4 feet and rising. No one can leave unless you want to wade chest or waist deep out to your car. But off in the distance, you can see the cars in that parking lot. The water's already halfway up the wheels, and that's the highest ground of the parking lot. So heading back over here, this is Water Street again. And that's an exit sign here at the hotel that was coming off. There's already been a lot of debris and trash washing up the street. That's Water Street again. That's a street. You see the buildings, these tin roof buildings peeling back now. There has been episodes of gutters on this hotel falling off, as well as things flying through the air, and that's the whole danger of the wind speed, because everything that's picked up by the wind flies at the rate of speed of 2/3 that of the wind. And so, you know, you have a 150 mile an hour hurricane, that's 100 mile an hour 2x4s or whatnot flying your direction. And that is why everybody has been ordered in this county. In fact, all the counties in the Big Bend and Pensacola or Panhandle area to shelter in, stay home. It is an order, not a recommendation. Everybody, nobody's on the streets throughout this entire region of Florida, it is simply too dangerous, and you can look right there and see why. It's too dangerous to go down to that water. The water is moving fast. The winds are whipping in these bands. The rain hurts. And to show you again, the Apalachicola River, which runs down into Apalachicola Bay and St. George Island to the southeast of here, that's an extremely low-lying island. And according to the sheriff's deputies I was speaking with last night, everybody evacuated that island very smartly. Wow, that's a good wind. So that's the river that should be flowing left to right, but instead is being blown back upstream. So that's why this entire region is expecting some serious flooding in the next day or two, if not longer than that. The water's got to go somewhere, and right now it's not going where it needs to go, to the Gulf of Mexico. Chat, back to you.
The eye of the storm is now north of you, Phil. I have 20 seconds left, but it is passed to the north and west of you, and you're on what amounts to the lower side, so the winds are going to shift.
Yeah, absolutely. The wind's right now coming from the Gulf, and then once the rotation changes, then we're going to get the wind and the waves and the storm surge coming from the west side of the Big Bend.
And that'll be happening very, very soon. It's almost time for a top-of-the-hour reset. This is Fox News Channel, America's choice for news and information on cable. Our coverage continues right now. It's 1 o'clock on the East Coast, 10 a.m. on the West Coast, and high noon along the Florida Gulf Coast, where a storm of historic proportions is now barreling down. It's not about predictions now. This is a live look. This is the storm, with the rains extending from St. Petersburg and Clearwater, Florida, all the way up to Birmingham and Hoover, Alabama. Hundreds and hundreds of miles of rain, but here's where the storm is. This is live weather radar from the land, showing not a prediction, but the actual location of the eye of the storm, and here it is. The projection was just about an hour ago that this storm, the eye wall, the center of the eye wall, would go over Mexico Beach, which is here. That is clearly now not the case. The eye wall is going to move north and west, and when it comes ashore, it now appears it will hit somewhere along Tyndall Parkway, make a direct hit toward Tyndall Air Force Base, and the eastern side of the city of Panama City. These are the Panama City beaches. The eye now appears headed directly for the city of Panama City itself. Around Panama City are enormous bays. This is St. Andrews Bay, Upper Lagoon, East Bay. These towns of Parker, Callaway, Springfield, Cedar Grove, Highland Park, all ready to get a direct hit from this hurricane. Let's get a live update from the National Hurricane Center in Miami. Let's go live.
Welcome back to the National Hurricane Center. This is Ken Graham right here in our operations area. Looking at the clock, 1 o'clock Eastern, 12 o'clock Central. The latest update on Hurricane Michael. There are some new updates here. The pressure has dropped to 919 millibars, making this one of the top 3 or 4 lowest pressures of a landfalling hurricane in the United States. So very serious situation, very powerful hurricane. We're getting wind gusts at Port St. Joe of 106 miles an hour, and listen to we've been talking about the storm surge, and you know, looking at 6.5 feet already around Apalachicola. So the water's coming in, the wind is coming in, and actually looking at radar, you can see a portion of this eye wall making it onshore between Panama City and Mexico Beach. Very powerful situation with the winds, and it's not just right around the center. We're looking at, you know, hurricane force wind gusts and these rain bands away from the center, and that could be incredibly dangerous. Look how far some of these rain bands stretch, and those are areas that we have the dangers of the tornadoes and also the high winds. But very dangerous situation as this eye wall makes it onto land over the next hour or so. This is something that we definitely want to talk about. Once the eye wall makes it on land, some people, if you're in some of these areas as we travel northward as a hurricane, could get some calm in the eye of the storm. It's very dangerous to be going outside during that time. That calm doesn't last long, and you still have the other side of the eye to get there, and that could cause a lot of problems for folks. So be very careful about that. Taking a look at the forecast with time, catastrophic wind damage We're looking at trees down, power outages for weeks. You're talking about structures collapsing, roofs off associated with this wind. But we got to look a little further inland too. So if you're watching this, we could still see a hurricane traveling further north into Georgia, and then tropical storm even into the Carolinas, as we have a tropical storm warning for that flow around the system and bringing some of those winds. So even inland, you can see some of these trees down and some of the impacts. Let's talk about those impacts. We talked about the wind. We talked about the dangers associated with the wind. We also have heavy rain associated with the hurricane. 6 to 10 inches of rain. Our Weather Prediction Center putting together these numbers right around the area of landfall, stretching into portions of Alabama and Georgia. But look how far that you can start seeing this 4 to 6 inches of rain with time. And that, with those winds, can knock down more power lines, could knock down some trees, causing some issues in those areas as well. So it's not just a coastal situation. Deadly storm surge. We've been talking about that for days, and they're already starting to get reports of the storm surge coming in, and that's the leading cause of fatalities in these tropical systems. So we spend time talking about this. 9 to 14 feet is the inundation forecast in this situation, and that we're looking at for Tyndall Air Force Base over to Osceola, River, and that's an incredible amount of storm surge. Think about that above the ground. On top of that, the waves. You can actually get destructive waves on top of those values as well. So traveling down the coast, even to Cedar Key, 6 to 9 feet, all the way into the Tampa metro area, 2 to 4 feet. Very dangerous situation, and we've been talking about not just an issue right on the immediate coast, because the water can go right over those barrier islands and then start forcing their way into the bays and the rivers. So some of these areas can see storm surge well inland. The red area there is greater than 9 foot of storm surge. So think about it. You could be 10, 20 miles inland and still see the impacts, not only the wind, not only the rain, but the storm surge well inland. So we'll be watching this storm, extremely dangerous hurricane, and we'll be watching it here from the National Hurricane Center.
Thanks very much. That's the 1 o'clock Eastern noon update from the National Hurricane Center. And as he mentioned, there have been changes. The storm has gotten stronger. The central pressure has dropped. Remember, this is a low pressure center. The lower the pressure, the heavier the winds and the stronger the storm, down to 119. That would make this the third lowest pressure upon landfall if it holds for an hour in United States history. And by far, nothing comparable, the strongest storm to hit this Gulf Coast since the 1850s. Remember, the storm that hit just over here, the storm Katrina, came ashore as a Category 2. This is a Category 4 and very close to a Category 5, 150 mile an hour winds. Exactly where is it going? We have another update here. This is live local radar. We talked about Mexico Beach earlier. Looks like Mexico Beach is going to be on the right-hand side of this storm. Horrible winds, wind gusts to 160 miles an hour, extreme storm surge all the way down here. The worst of the storm surge has not yet come for Apalachicola Bay up to Port St. Joe, all the way up Highway 98 to Mexico Beach, up Tyndall Parkway and Tyndall Air Force Base. From what we could, this is Tyndall Air Force Base right here. This is the eye of the storm, and it's moving there. Tyndall Air Force Base is about to take a direct hit from the strongest hurricane ever to hit along the Florida Gulf Coast. In addition to that, somewhere in Panama City is going to get clipped by the western edge of the eye wall. See this western edge? The blue in the center there, that's the worst of the winds and the rains. That's 145, 150 mile an hour sustained winds plus extreme driving rain. And that the hurricane force winds extend for 45 miles. All of this rain, this red is extreme rain. That's going to cover all of Panama City, back over toward the Back Beach Road, Front Beach Road, Middle Beach Road, about halfway up the 27 miles of Panama City Beach. Most of PC Beach, that 27-mile stretch, all the way up into South Walton County, Seaside, Seagrove, and all of that, their wind is going to be coming from the shore to the land. Their beaches will go for miles in some areas because it's so shallow there. But to the right, the water will inundate Port St. Joe, all of this area around Apalachicola, and then will eventually make its way into Bluntstown. If you live in Bluntstown or Chattahoochee or Mariana, this is your storm. A hurricane force wind is coming to your town in a matter of hours. Hunker down now. Rick Leventhal is